Hey, what is going on, guys? Max Settings here, and welcome back to another review. In today's review, we are going to be taking a look at the Hifiman Arya. This is another planar offering from Hifiman. I've done quite a few of their headphones at this point, and here we are doing another one. But before we get into today's review, I just have to say that this headphone was provided by headphones.com through their community program, and Headphones.com is an online headphones retailer that offers a 365-day return policy. So you can buy any headphone from them and you have 365 days to decide if you like it. And if you decide in that 1 year period that you do not like it, you can return it for a full refund to the original purchase method, not just store credit. Full refund to your credit card or bank account or PayPal or whatever. So I just have to give a big shout out to them for providing this unit for review. But anyway, the Arya is another HE1000 style headphone from Hifiman. They've done quite a few of these. After the HE1000, they've done the Edition X V1 and V2, the Ananda, the Edition XX on mass drop, and now we have the Arya. And also of note, the Arya actually was intended to be a mass drop product, originally called the HE1000X. And you can find photos of this that says HE1000X here where it says Arya. And even like Moon Audio, until like a couple months ago, even their store page, the photos showed it saying HE1000X, not Arya. If I can find the photo, I'll put it up on screen here of it saying HE1000X. So yeah, this was supposed to be a mass drop product, but something fell through and Hifiman decided to sell it for themselves. And I'm assuming they went with this name to capitalize on the recent Game of Thrones hype, or loss of hype, I guess you could say now. But anyway, moving on into specs. These headphones cost $1,599. They are planar magnetic. They have an impedance of 35 ohms with a 90 dB per milliwatt sensitivity, frequency response of 8 to 65,000 hertz, and a weight of 404 grams. Okay, so this time I'm actually going to start with accessories in the box. I usually start with build, but I'm going to talk about box and accessories real quick. So pulling this off screen. So this is the box that the Arya comes with. And for those of you that saw my review of the Hifiman Ananda, which is the cheaper version of this, the cheaper portable, easier to drive version of the Arya, I guess you could technically say, that headphone had the really nice leather Hifiman box, the same box that like the HE1000 comes in, but just black, and the older like HE560 and a couple other headphones came in this really nice leather box. Even like the 400i at one point came in it. And that's a nice box. I liked it for that $1,000 price point. Now the Ananda's down to $850, so it's even cheaper. Still has that box as far as I know. But here we are with the Arya at a $1,600 price point, so almost double what the Ananda is at currently. And here we are with a cardboard box. This is the same box that the Sundara came in. It has the same like a cloth material in there with the space to put the headphones on the wire, but cheaper box on the more expensive headphones, which I thought was pretty interesting. So that's the box for the Arya. Just note you get a worse box for the more expensive headphone. And then as for the stock cable, I didn't even bother using it. I'm just going to leave it just wrapped up. But this is the same, basically the same generic stock Hifiman cable that came with like the HE560, the HE1000. But now it's even cheaper because they don't even use Neutrik connectors anymore. This is just like a generic 1/4 inch plug, but same stiff fabric covered cable. That's really cheap and I'm sure breaks because most Hifiman cables break. So the cable I used for all this was my Periapt cable. I will link them down below. I do like their cables a lot for the money. So link to Periapt Cables down in the description below. Okay, so moving on into the build of the Arya. Now there is a somewhat interesting thing we have to talk about here with the Arya, which is the revision that was recently done, because they have done a silent revision of the Arya that I will show you in a second. But anyway, so this headphone is using the older HE1000 style headband that I much prefer. As I mentioned in the reviews of the Sundara, the Ananda, the Jade 2, I do not like the newer Hifiman headband because it lacks the swivel. You can't do this on that headband. So this is the older style headband, which is better, and I hope this is a sign that Hifiman realized that and is not going to be using that headband anymore. Please, please go back to this headband and slightly improve it. Aside from that, the pretty standard fare. The top is metal, the same like pleather comfort strap like this. I do like on the newer ones that this is a suede on the bottom, so I would actually be okay with them making like that change, but keep this headband. Now, some of the low points, this slide adjustment mechanism is really, really cheap plastic, like really cheap feeling plastic. I don't like how cheap that feels. I feel like that's going to break. Also, I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but you can see that the slider actually scratches the paint on the headband. That's classic Hifiman. They've done that basically forever since they've used this headband. So standard fare there. Plastic yokes, so hopefully this has the metal, because Hifiman is known for yokes snapping when being plastic, so that's always been a problem. Plastic cups, I believe the grills are plastic as far as I can tell. I don't think this is metal. This feels like plastic to me. The standard newer style Hifiman pads with the hybrid cloth material, where this used to be velour on like the older HE1000 V1. 3.5 millimeter connection on the bottom because they've switched from 2.5 to 3.5 millimeter. With this particular pair, I have like this is squeaking in like the left cup whenever you like extend it and it's on your head and you start like moving it. It's not actually doing it right now, but this thing would used to make like this horrible squeaking sound. There it goes. Hang on, I'll put it in front of the mic. Yeah, so imagine that when it's on your head. Anytime it shifts at all, you just get this squeak, squeak, squeak. So yeah, this pair is squeaking and rubbing on the left side. And this also feels a little loose. Like there's a lot of give in like the amount of wobble on this side that this right side does not have. So yeah, definitely a little bit sketchy Hifiman build as usual. So that's a little bit longer of a build segment, but okay, so that's a little bit longer of a build segment than usual, but to further extend that even more, there is something else we have to talk about, and that is the silent revision that Hifiman has done to the Arya here. So the most notable thing that has changed with the Arya from the older versions is when I pull the pad off here, there it goes, you will notice that the mesh over the driver is now permanently affixed to the headphone. And this has never been the case with any HE1000 style headphone. It has always been over the pads, the mesh, the driver covering mesh. As you can see, that is no longer the case. So here we are with the mesh actually directly on the headphone. And the other thing that you will notice is the driver, I guess this is the baffle around the driver, is now carbon fiber, which it used to be like a bare like PCB material, but now it's a carbon fiber baffle. And also the material behind the cups is denser than it used to be. If you look at the older revision, this is much more see-through and you can see the back of the driver. And they have a denser material back here where you really cannot see the back of the driver hardly at all, except in really ideal lighting conditions, which was not the case before. So here I'm going to throw up a photo from Zeos' review, because he did the Arya and he had the earlier revision. So here's a little screenshot from his video. I will link it down in the description as credit, of course. Got to give credit where credit is due. And as you can see on his, no mesh here because it's on the pads, and no carbon fiber baffle. I don't know if you can tell on camera if it's carbon fiber. I think, yeah, there it is. You can see it. So that is quite interesting that they have gone and made these changes. I'm assuming the reason for changing the mesh is because they don't want people touching the driver at all or anything getting on it. So they just straight up just put the thing on the headphone itself, so you didn't have to worry about anything ever touching the driver or getting in there. So that's my guess for that. Now, as for why they changed the baffle to carbon fiber, I have no idea. It seems like an odd change to make, in my opinion. And I guess maybe this will be the future for all HE1000 style headphones, is that they will start putting the driver covering directly on the headphone and not directly on the pads. Now, as for the back dampening, I don't know how much of a difference that makes over the older ones. I mean, I've heard an older one at a show, but not at home, so I really couldn't tell you, so don't ask me. You'll have to have somebody that has both versions, so that is just something to note here on the Arya. All right, so moving on into the comfort of the Arya. So the Arya I do find very comfortable. I've always liked this HE1000 style of headphones. The only thing that's going to be a problem for people is that they are very, very large headphones. They take up a large part of your face. And it takes a little bit of playing around with to get the positioning pretty well, so it sits on your head correctly. You don't really get a gap, because it's very easy to get a gap down here on the bottom and break the seal, which is going to make the bass do a little bit of crazy stuff. So that's the only real comfort problem with these, is just getting them to sit right on your head. But once you do, I find them very comfortable. I've always been a fan of this style of Hifimans. Now, as for power requirements, these actually take a decent amount of power to push. The HE1000 was always required a solid amount of power to get up and running, and these are very similar to that. These take more than like a Sennheiser or something. They definitely take some power. I'm pushing them harder on my amp than both of these do, both the HD800 and the Otor that are sitting here. So these definitely take closer to like HE1000 style power, whereas the Ananda was much more efficient and easy to drive, because that one's meant to be used more portable and off of phones and portable players and stuff like that. So these do take a decent amount of power to get up and running. Okay, so moving on into the sound of the Arya. So the Arya's frequency response is pretty typical of a HE1000 style of headphone. So basically just flat bass all the way down to 20 hertz. With on the measurements, there's always these weird little jaggeds in the bass, but they're not really that noticeable. You shouldn't really notice them when listening. After that, there is a little bit of a recession of 2 or 3 dB. After about 1K, like 1K, 2K, there's like a slight little bit of a recession. A little bit of a 3K peak that you definitely notice when listening to Sine Sweep, and is also backed up with the measurements. After that, it does drop back off again for like 4 and 5K-ish. And then once you hit around 6K, it does start coming back up for just a little bit of elevated treble that I would say is elevated probably 3 to 4 dB above where like the bass and your lower mids were. So pretty typical for like an HE1000 style headphone. Flat bass, a little bit recessed mids, and a little bit elevated treble. So pretty typical frequency response for one of these. Now, soundstage is decent. For whatever reason, I still think it's not as wide as what I remember the HE1000 V1 sounding to me. But it's been a long time since I've heard the V1, so it's probably just me not remembering correctly. So not as wide as HD800, not as wide as like an LCD2 or something like that, but a decent soundstage with decent width, and it seems wider than I remember the Ananda being. Imaging is also pretty good, pretty solid imaging from left to right. Nothing mind-blowingly so, but pretty standard, pretty decent imaging here on the Arya. Now, detail-wise, they're pretty good for the money. This is a tough segment, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. There's a lot of good players here. And I think detail-wise, they probably fall right in the middle. They do have more detail than the Ananda did for sure. Now, as compared to HE1000, I would have to have them next to each other to say how far behind this is. But this sounds better than I remember the Edition X sounding. And like I said, more detailed than the Ananda. Now, as for dynamics, and the HE1000 is not the most dynamic sounding headphone out there. For a $3,000 price point, dynamics are pretty poor. For like the $1,000 to $1,500 they go for use, more acceptable, but definitely not the most dynamic headphone in the price bracket. And these do have more dynamics than the Ananda did. I mentioned that the Ananda had pretty meh dynamics and very high THD. Where this is much better and much closer to HE1000. But still, for the price and in the segments, definitely a little bit lacking. And timbre, very typical plasticky Hifiman timbre, sounds pretty typical of another HE1000 family of headphone. And I believe that is about all the things that we are going to cover for sound here on the Arya. So moving on into comparisons. So the Hifiman Arya sits in what I probably would consider the most competitive bracket in the headphone market, which is like the mid, like the halfway, the 1500-ish mark, where there is a lot of good open back players in the $1,500-ish price bracket, two of which we happen to have sitting here. Sort of. So the first one, the ZMF Otor. This is my pair of Otors. These are right around $1,500. Depends on your wood choice and other options, but these sit right around $1,500-ish new, with the Arya being $1,600 in case you forgot. Also, you have the new HD 800S. I say new, not as in like it came out recently, but like a new set of HD 800S. This is my HD 800 original Super DuPont Resonator mod or SDR mod. So that's going to take the place of HD 800S in for this comparison. The other two that come to mind, the Audeze LCD X and the Focal Clear. And I know somebody's going to say Mr. Speaker's Ether Flow, but no, just no. But anyway, so as for how they compare to, let's start with the two things here on the table. The Otor is more dynamic sounding with better slam, but these have definitely less detail, much warmer, much darker, and a lot more laid back. Now, the HD 800, much wider soundstage, much better detail, but weird tonality, sharp 6K peak, weird frequency response, and as I mentioned, very, very amp picky, very amp dependent, very, some people would say clinical and cold sounding, and very source revealing, very music picky. So, I mean, HD 800 is its own thing. LCDX is a weird one, because the LCDX is known for insane driver variance and differences between pairs. I've heard 3 pairs of LCDX, 2 of which were complete garbage, and one that was actually pretty good and I liked a lot. So if you get a good pair in the lottery of LCDXs, I think, I'm not 100% sure how they would compare with detail. I've not had enough time with one to really tell you, but I would say it's probably similar, if not slightly better, would be my guess. And wider stage, better dynamics, but very dark tuning, very, very different tuning from Arya, where this is definitely more brighter. I'd say more catered towards more of a diffuse field preference, where LCDs cater maybe a little more towards Harman, but you still have to EQ it to get it to Harman. But closer to that warm, dark thing that Harman people tend to like. This is more closer to what diffuse field people tend to like. Now, Focal Clear, that one's also going to be interesting. The times I've heard it, I've really thought it sounded very, very similar to the Alex, but some people say it's way more detailed than the Alex is, so I'm going to have to wait to hear that one at home too. But frequency response wise, they were basically the same according to the measurements. If the clear is a more detailed Alex, then I would say that that is probably also about on the same realm, if not slightly more resolving, also with better dynamics. I've thought the Alex had good stage, but everybody says it doesn't. I don't know, never got that. So, I mean, soundstage probably around the same. That one's also going to lean a little more towards brighter, but still a little different tuning, the more metallic timbre, and just a very different sound overall. So the reason why you would buy the Arya over all of those is its presentation of sound. These HE1000 style headphones have a massive driver, and they put on a very large sense of space when you're listening to music. You have this huge driver that puts on this just wall of sound that you hear. And for some tracks, especially like Yoshi Horikawa stuff, it is very, very immersive sounding. And that has always been the thing that I think really draws people to this series of headphones, is the really immersive sound that these give you with this giant driver and a large sense of space. One of my friends that I let try these, I let him try a lot of the stuff, he really liked these, and his favorite thing that he's ever tried for me was the Stax L700, and he said that this reminds him of that. And the only way I could see that is with a similar presentation because of that really large driver, because the L700 also has a very large driver and a similar kind of size and shape as this. So I think that is what draws people to these, is that large presentation of sound. Now, as for how they compare to HE1000, these remind me a lot of HE1000 V1. They're not as bright as V2. V2 is brighter than V1. From memory, these sound closer to V1 than they did to V2. They sound a little not as bright as V2. Dynamics seem very, very similar. Detail-wise, I mean, I'd have to hear them again. It's been a while. But these sound... the Arya sounds the closest to an HE1000, at least in my opinion, compared to any of the other sub-variants like the Edition X or the Ananda. This is the closest sounding HE1000 sub-variant to the HE1000, at least in my opinion. So overall, I really do like the Arya. It sits in a very tough spot in the market with a lot of good competitors. But it has some things it does well. It has some things it doesn't do well. The build's pretty sketchy. Dynamics aren't great, but really large driver. And for a brighter planar in the $1,000 to $2,000 price bracket, I mean, this is the one to go for if you're shopping new. Now, you can get a used HE1000 for what this costs new. I mean, V1s hang like $1,000 to $1,100, V2s around $1,500. So you definitely can get an HE1000 used for what this costs new. But this, obviously, you have the warranty, because most HE1000s are going to be out of warranty at this point. So I guess that's something to consider. And on Hifiman, that is definitely something to consider with this build quality. But anyway, Arya overall, I do like it, and it is going to get my recommendation for a brighter planar. And for those of you that are fans of this HE1000 style of headphone. But anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed my review of the Hifiman Arya. Links of where to buy these on headphones.com in the description, because once again, shout out to them for supplying it. As well as links to the ears graph to these, my Twitter, my contact email, and all other relevant information down below. But anyway, guys, I look forward to seeing you in the next review. Bye.